So, Conrad, I'm just recently back from Vegas from a 360 advocacy lawyer seminar. And one of the questions that was brought up at this seminar by a lawyer was, how much time should I be spending on marketing? What's the answer? How much time should we be spending? How much time should we be telling people to spend on marketing?
Guess what? It depends, Gyi. I look at this in a lot of different ways. Time and money are interchangeable, right? And so you may have a lot of one or the other, and you're really trading one for the other when you're thinking about how much time you want to actually put into this. And so I think about that, and there's a spectrum of this. You think about the brand new lawyer, right? You got no money, you have a ton of time. So the first thing that you have to think about when you're dealing with time and money is you should be, in that scenario, in that reality, you should be spending close to 100% of your time on marketing. And the reality is that will generate work without spending a bunch of money on pay-per-click or LSAs or SEO or websites or things like that, right? And so you can put that money, that time into it. You then also get attorneys who are doing well. They don't want to put time because they want to be a lawyer. Their reality, they're kind of cognizant what they want to be doing with their time is lawyering, not marketing. And in those cases, you find those marketing channels that work really well when you just throw money at it. I'd use pay-per-click as an example of that. Local service ads as an example of that. On the flip side, you have lawyers who are like, you know what? I talked to one of my new favorite positioning lawyers, Charlotte Town, the mermaid lawyer. And she says, you know what? She does all of her marketing is on social media. That is time that she puts into social media. She doesn't spend any dollars, but she does it through creating content. She's decided not to spend the dollars because she wants to put the time in. Flip side, you don't want to spend the time, so put the money in if you have it, but you got to have one or the other. And then finally, kind of at the furthest end of that extreme, Gyi, I think you have the lawyers who have no desire to do anything with the practice of law, but they have really become CEOs. And they're not spending, they're spending both time and money on marketing their firm, and they're spending zero time on lawyering. And so my honest answer to you is, it really equates to how much of a growth mindset do you have. If you are a solo with a big growth mindset, put a lot of time and or money into this. If you are a solo happy kind of keeping the lights on and you want to spend your time lawyering, you can do that, but your growth ceiling is pretty low.
So I think I generally agree with most of what you said. But I also think about a lot of the lawyers that we talk to, that we know listen to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing, and for most of them, I think the answer is some combination of both.
Sure.
And the first thing that I think about is if you're the face of your law firm, or if you're a small firm, it's going to be very hard for you to position your firm behind a trade name or a logo, I think. You need a lawyer to be forefront of the firm. And so that by and of itself, there's going to be some time spent on creating some kind of content, whether it's being active on social media, whether it's creating video content. Now, how much time should you spend on that? I think there's ways to batch, right? Do a record once and then chop it up. And I really, from a tactical standpoint, if I had to twist your arm and I'm like, all right, you're a 4-person law firm.
Okay.
And all the lawyers are running their own books of business. They're all running their own cases.
They're generating their own cases.
They're doing both. Guys, I'm assuming that most of our listeners are probably doing some combination of both. And in fact, as I know some of those CEO type lawyers that you're talking about, and you mentioned in the show prep some of the big dogs, and some of those big dogs, I agree with you. They're not practicing much. They're spending a lot of time on running the firm.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of them that are doing a little bit of both, and to different proportions, right? Maybe some of them are carrying a heavier load or lighter loads of cases and spending more time marketing and vice versa. But to that group where you're like, look, let's be real about this. Most of them are doing both. What are some of the things that they can be doing and how much time should that be taking? I think that's really, for me, that's at the root of the question. Because again, of course, you can be like, I'm just going to go delegate this and hire a bunch of people. Now, I'll tell you, I think there's some consequences to that, because if it's your firm and you hire somebody to do that who's not a trusted partner, guess what? They can take their business with you, go hang a new shingle.
You mean hire that kind of rainmaker lawyer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm just really trying to drive at the question of for this listener persona. Okay. I'm at a small firm, I'm at a consumer facing practice firm. Okay. I'm good. I have to work some cases, but I also recognize I got to spend some time. How much time are we talking about? And I, to the point, I totally agree with you. It totally depends. There is no right answer, but one of the things that I'll just give you one answer, start somewhere, carve out 5 to 10 minutes a day and start getting active on social media. Maybe you're just engaging with people in your, that in your local community on Facebook or something. But my thing is like, I think they get overwhelmed because they think about this like, oh, I'm looking at some of the lawyers that you're talking about, these TikTok lawyers who are cranking out video after video, and they're just like, I can't keep up with that. So what's the point? And I don't know that that's the right way to look at it. I think you got to start somewhere. Start with a couple minutes here and there. And I always talk about like the small time. So, you're waiting for motion call, or maybe if you still commute, or I don't know, you find some small time to like invest some time in it. But I just constructively, like if you're going to do anything, I guess I would start with a few minutes here and there on social media. I think it can go a lot further than a lot of lawyers recognize.
I mean, there's nuances to your comment. I think the time that you spent on social media is often wasted because you're doing that part of it wrong, right? There's a lot of your time should be spent on connecting with people as opposed to just posting stuff that no one reads.
So that's a different issue, though. So it is when you say
spend the right time, right?
Spend the right time, and that's the other thing that I wanted to at least, because there's another thing that came up in Vegas, was this idea that it's a waste of time, and this idea of like, well, if you can't measure, hey, I posted on Facebook and I didn't get a click and a phone call and a hire, that was a waste of time. I don't know if I buy that.
You in fact, I will tell the listeners that you don't buy that. Gyi does not believe in if you can't measure it, you shouldn't do it. And I would 100% fall into that camp. Interestingly, like my thoughts on this has really evolved. And I think it's the change in consumer behavior on the web that has evolved my thinking on this. But like, just because you cannot measure a direct, and I will kick this metric all over the place, because you cannot measure a direct ROI does not mean you should not be doing that thing. And my take is you should, my assumption here is that if you are trying to aggressively grow your firm, you should be spending as much time as necessary lawyering to keep your cash flow going and put everything else into growing your firm, right? If that's your objective. Now, that's not, I think your question here is, hey, Conrad, that's not everyone's objective. Can you start out smaller than that? And the answer is yes. But the reality is when you're putting, and we've used this construct before when we're using your percentage of revenue that you're putting into marketing. It's the same thing. Money is time is money. And it's the amount of revenue that you're putting into your marketing. But, for what we call the high growth businesses, they're putting over north of 25% of their revenue into their marketing, right? And so that is high growth. So to turn that directly into time, putting a quarter of your time into your marketing, if you have a high growth mindset, that is not insane. That is not insane.
I like that benchmark.
Yeah. 25% of your
25%.
time. 25%. You're working.
There you go.
There you go. You heard it here first, people.
Yeah.
And by the way, listening to Lunch Hour Legal Marketing counts for 25% of your time.
In the marketing bucket?
Yeah, because you're getting smarter by listening to us.
All right.
Babble.
Okay.
There you go. 25% of your, but then the other part of this is like, yeah, you can spend 5 to 10% of your time on these types of activities, or 5 to 10% of your revenue on these types of activities, and you're going to do a good job keeping the lights on. But you're not in a growth mindset, right? And there's a continuum along across the spectrum.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I take it. There's maybe you don't probably aren't intending to do this, but there seems to be this implication that if you're not spending a bunch of money, that you're not in a growth mindset. And I just don't buy it. There's a lot of lawyers out there that I know listen to this podcast that they're, you can define growth. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You can define growth mindset, but they're eager to grow. They want to grow. But the business model of many firms is not $20,000 a month SEO budget, is not $20,000 a month PPC budget. And they're doing just great. They're multi-million-dollar firms.
100%. And this is the key here. These things are interchangeable. Time and money and time are interchangeable. And you can really grow your firm if you put a ton of your time into, what is the beauty of that social is happening right now. And we've talked about dark social in the past and all this stuff. The beauty of that is that you can grow your firm. So we talked about the examples that come right off my head are Dean Blatchford in Toronto, the tax lawyer that we talked about, who does the baseball game, right? That's all he does. He puts a ton of time into that. That has been the growing, that is the driver of his firm's success. I just mentioned the mermaid lawyer, Charlottetown, down in Florida. She doesn't put any money into advertising, but she puts a bunch of her time into content generation and connecting with people on social. And that is very, very, very successful. So I look at these things as interchangeable. What you can't do is not spend any time or money and then be pissed when your law firm doesn't grow.
Money makes a it makes a world go round. Money makes a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go round. Yeah, money make a world go